selfing machine is there. It's a suppression mechanism, you know. Yeah, that's what it does, you know. It helps you stuff all that stuff down into your subconscious, you know. All this crap that had been building up inside me for years suddenly literally just exploding out in my heart. It's like I was like literally lying in bed like shouting, going, oh, what the hell? Like, it was like 10 seconds of this really powerful energy blasting out.
Really?
Yeah, so that's why I say, you know, my first Bhumi opening was very revealing, like, because it just blasted so much of that confusion out. It was a crazy roller coaster of a period for me, like an emotional roller coaster. It was really, really intense. It was an implosion. So my first Bhumi opening was an explosion, and the 10th Bhumi was an implosion that just imploded right into this point here. And like, as soon as it stopped and imploded into this point, it was like this really loud bang. And then that was it, you know. I kind of opened my eyes and looked around the room and said, okay, it's done. Yeah. When you experience this, you're just gonna laugh. Ha 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 ho ho. for a good while, and then that'll be it, you know. You'll have complete clear understanding of what this selfing machine is and how unnecessary it is. It is helpful to think of the path as being a process of gradually clearing out that confusion. But this is a technique that helps you to get through the path, where you realize at the end that this wasn't taking place at all. There was no gradual disintegration of self-based mind. The self-based mind was there or it wasn't there. It's like you say, it's binary. It's either there or it's not there. Pretty phenomenal experience when this is realized in the body. I've never felt this kind of energy and aliveness in the body. It's incredible. Like,
sounds good.
Oh, it's better than good. It's amazing, yeah, because now not only is the mind free of all this suffering, but the body is starting to realize this ultimate realization, and it's like the cells in the body just start to fire up, you know. The energy that you didn't realize you had, strength you didn't realize you have, suddenly turns on. And yeah, it's an incredibly healthy and healing feeling.
Hello and welcome to the Lion Face Guru podcast. I'm Chris, and this is another in a series of interviews with the Mahasiddhas of Amrita Mandala Sangha. Amrita Mandala is a group of lay people with ordinary lives, some of whom have taken the path all the way to first stage of Buddhahood, the perfectly stable, complete and irreversible realization of the empty nature of all phenomena. Perfectly awake and clear mind, free from mental suffering, and these interviews are to find out about them, their path, and accounts of their realization. Today's conversation with Shane was a delight. Until now, our paths had never crossed, and I've always been curious to find out about him, and what has, by all accounts, been a somewhat extraordinary journey. Shane, from Dublin, Ireland, is a jazz musician, a composer, and also a music teacher at a school. From the outside, Shane's path seemed incredibly consistent and direct. But as we shall find out, it wasn't always so smooth and plain sailing, and was even downright difficult and traumatic at times. Shane talks very openly and vividly about his journey. The intensity of Shane's initial awakening back in 2017 took him by surprise, was somewhat terrifying even, to be faced with reality so directly. Yet this seemed to give him a clear insight into the nature of self and what the path was all about, seemingly propelling him along the path in a somewhat turbulent fashion. Shane talks about the process of dark nights, the games of the selfing mechanism, and how it's not a good idea for practitioners in later stages to think they're nearly done. Even the slightest trace of confusion means you're not done. You're still under the illusory spell of the self and stuck in samsara. Shane's final realization into the empty nature of self over a year and a half ago now was also quite an event, and Shane gives a lovely and clear explanation of how it was for him, this sense of being reborn again, and how life has evolved since. For me, this is a very humble account from someone who only wants to live a simple life and has no invested interest in becoming a spiritual teacher or reason to go about boasting about such things as spiritual attainments. There are so many lessons I've taken from this talk with Shane, and I know this is his only motive, to share his journey so that others may benefit and discover things that he's discovered for themselves. Shane followed the path of Amrita Mandala Sangha, a pragmatic path of insight suitable for people with ordinary modern lives. So if you want to find out more about the practices Shane did, you can begin by looking at amritamandala.com for information, and also find a book called Buddhas Among Us by Amrita Baba on the website, with accounts of this first stage realization of Buddhahood by other practitioners. So I hope you enjoy the interview, and please remember to like, subscribe and share if you think these interviews will benefit others. Thank you. This is the first time actually meeting and talking with Shane. So it's really nice. It's an honor to meet you. And as someone coming in at the time that I did, I think your story was sort of quite notable in the Sangha for the path that you'd started. There seemed to be this very extremely quick progression in the beginning, like people hadn't seen before. And from my perspective of seeing what you've written in the Sangha and all of these types of things, your practice seemed very consistent. The whole thing seemed to go in a smooth, straight line all the way.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly probably appeared that way, but it had a lot of ups and downs and stuff, the usual stuff. But yeah, I guess it was pretty consistent. Yeah.
So I'm interested in sort of getting into some of the details, because sort of hints that there were some rocky patches, but at the same time, there was a strength to your practice, which I think others of us can learn from. Or one of the really notable things that for me, as I was reading through some of your old posts and things like that, was how clear this idea of what the self was and what the aim of the path was. And so you began with the 2-part formula. I think you'd said you'd had 6 months of mindfulness practice, maybe 10 years or so before that.
Maybe it's, I think 12 years previous to that. I did some I guess you could call it mindfulness practice. I mean, mindfulness of breathing, and that kind of stuff, but nothing too deep and nothing that would have resulted in any kind of insight as such. Like it was I guess very simple stuff.
And so this realization seemed really strong for you at the initial awakening. It seemed to sort of blast you. If I compare it to myself, there was a lot of searching and exploring, and I was still very wrapped up in the self in my dark nights and things. But there seemed something very clear happen for you right from the beginning, and it seemed to propel you.
Yeah, it was the first awakening was like, it kind of revealed everything for me. It wasn't, I get the impression from a lot of people, their first awakening is quite, they're almost not even sure if it happened, or, even when they get confirmation from Kim. Kind of, they're still a little bit like, well, I think something happened. But for me, it was like, it was huge. It was a massive, revealed everything. It revealed exactly what the self was and exactly where I needed to go to finish off the process. I mean, I honestly believe that if I didn't do any practice after my first awakening, I would have still had Bhumi openings and perfections anyway. But obviously the practice that we have is a very powerful practice that's sped up the process for me, but it's like, it was so revealing, that first insight, that I knew exactly what to do from that point onwards. It was very clear. I really I kind of realized, like Buddha self, I realized Buddha nature immediately from that point of that first awakening. Like, I mean, when that first awakening occurred, the first thing I even said to me just seconds after I had that awakening was that I said to myself, without even thinking about it, I said, I can be me now. I realized, oh my God, I can be me now. It was all this, I didn't realize all this messiness had been going on before. And I was, like everybody does, they're very confused. They're trying to find themselves. They're trying to please people. They're trying to be somebody. They don't know what they're trying to be, Well, it's very confused all the time. And I realized at that point, oh my God, I don't have to be any of that, but obviously I didn't realize at that stage that all that crap was going to start coming back in again. But it was like I completely realized Buddhahood in that moment, very clear realization of Buddhahood. So, it all came back, bit by bit, but that initial insight that I had stayed with me very, very clearly. Like that connection with the natural state, that presence of a guru was just there, like incredibly strong, like right from the first moment.
Oh, wow.
It stayed with me through the whole practice, but obviously it got stronger as I opened more Bhumis. But then the final I guess perfection, the 10th perfection, it was the same realization. I can be
Right.
me,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
now I can actually be me. Now none of that stuff is going to come back in again and mess me up. It's all gone. So yeah.
Nice. So it was your brother Jonathan. This is the bit that interests me, is how you sort of came to it and how you opened to it so much, because Jonathan was in Jonathan, who's Shane's brother, and Jonathan is actually part of the reason that I joined, because I came across Dharma Mind and then came across that Jonathan had sort of discovered this practice, and all of a sudden everyone seemed to be waking up, and that was quite shocking. So that was my sort of entry to it. But you weren't a practitioner, so I'm curious as to, or as far as I know, and so I'm curious to sort of where did your path start? You talked about somehow you started seeking when you were very young.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff of remembering how I felt when I was young. That stuff only came to me after awakening. I totally forgotten that stuff. It was only later on I realized, when I thought back to my youth and I remembered those feelings I was having as a kid, I realized, wait, that's what was going on there. I was very keenly aware that something was not right, that I was trying to find something. I was trying to figure out, why do I feel like this? Why am I unsettled? There's something I want here and I don't know what it is.
Something was off.
Yes, something wasn't right, and I was very keenly aware of this as a young child. But yeah, you grow up and all this life just distracts you from all this stuff, and you accumulate more and more emotional baggage, and yeah, you just completely lose sight of it. But when I had my awakening, then I started to remember this stuff. So I was, I kind of remembered. I realized that all that practicing has been kind of going on all my life, and even like I guess the first spiritual book I read was by, I'm sure Eckhart Tolle, yeah, The Power of Now, and this was really like impactful on me. It was really kind of brought me back. Like, I mean, I read that maybe when I was in my mid-20s, and it really kind of brought me back into I guess a kind of a practice. I started to kind of remember that there was something that I was supposed to do. It's something that I was here to do, that I wasn't just here to play music or whatever, or make money, that there was something I was on this planet that to do. And then what happened, I got into that Dharma Mind group and started practicing, and I started reading more books from I guess who's that other I think he's a UK guy, is it David, oh, I can't remember his surname, but he's also awakened, and he has some books that talk about this process. So I was aware of awakening, at this point. I knew that it was a thing. But yeah, I started reading his book, and I don't know if he used the word awakening. I think he did use the word awakening, but he was talking about self, and the non-existence of self and all this stuff. And it obviously, like all of this, reading about this stuff, Eckhart Tolle and Aloka as well. Aloka would have talked about this stuff as well, because Aloka was also awakened, So I was aware of this illusory self. I was aware that there was this kind of self that I was believing in that was illusory, and it was kind of like a source of suffering in my life, and I needed to somehow see through this illusion. And I had some experiences around this time that I thought were awakenings, and looking back in them now, I think they were actually genuinely kind of almost there, but I guess there was no technique as such, like 2-part formula, to really kind of make it happen. But I was very much ready to awaken. There was something in me that was like really like, come on, hurry up, let's go. So when
Were you practicing with Dharma Mind?
That would have been that 6 month period or so. That was with Dharma Mind.
Oh, for 12 years before.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. So I would have read Aloka's books and stuff at this time. So yeah, like I said, I was aware of awakening, and people. I heard this term, a stream entry, and I knew of all this kind of stuff. So I knew there was more to meditation than just focusing on breathing, I knew there was more to a Dharma practice than just being nice to people, or this kind of thing. It all just seemed a little bit kind of like pointless to me. I knew there was something else that I needed to realize, that I need to get results from this practice that I'm doing, doing these kind of things. They don't produce results. Me being happy, or me being relaxed, or me being nice to people. This is kind of like, it's all good and everything, but ultimately, what's the point of it? There's something else that that needs to happen here, and it's not.
So almost you were waiting for this. A proper practice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then what happened was, I didn't do anything for 12 years or something. And then one day at home in my mum's house, Jonathan came up to me and said, I found this practice. I found this guy, and he has this thing called 2-part formula, and it induces awakening, and brings on insight in people. And for some reason, I don't know why, but before I even looked at it, before I even looked at the website, before anything, I knew that it was genuine.
Right.
I don't know. It was just like, immediately I was like, okay, yes, finally, this is it. This is what I have to do.
Yeah.
I didn't need to look at, and I didn't look at any of the documentation at all. And I didn't actually do the practice at all for at least 3 or 4 months or so. But the whole time it was there in my head, going around suddenly that desire to be free or to awaken started to really kind of churn up again inside me. So I didn't jump at it straight away. I guess that's just kind of a personality thing. I like to kind of do things when the time is right. I don't jump at things as such. I like to kind of pick my moment, choose my time to do things. So Jonathan eventually came back to me and kind of reminded me of, and I think it was at that point that he said, it actually worked. So that got me obviously very interested at that point. And that it was a few weeks before actually Kim was coming over to do the first city retreat here. So I started kind of doing the practice a little bit, just a few minutes a day, nothing too serious. And it's not like it worked immediately for me at all. It took me a couple of weeks to get the first insight. And it wasn't until, I talked to Kim about it. I hadn't awakened at that point. And in fact, a friend of mine who did it, it worked for her the first time she did it. She did it once and it worked straight away. So I was kind of thinking, geez, what's going on? Why isn't this working for me? And then I talked to Kim, and he gave me a couple of little words of advice. I think I was being too strong with it. I was being too forceful. I was forcing it too much. So I started experimenting with where we use the I, me, mine, these words, experimenting with different, saying it with, whispering it or shouting it, or just saying it in different ways, and experimenting with different approaches to using these words. And eventually I started to notice something happening. I started to notice, I think I wrote it in my first account, but I initially had that feeling like I had awakened, but it was that feeling like something was starting to kind of open up here at this point, starting to glow. I felt like that eye was that the point was just kind of starting to break open, the Bhumi bus, but it hadn't quite, when it did open for me, it was a massively explosive experience. It wasn't. Oh, wow. So it was like the cracks were starting to form there a little bit. Just that kind of initial stage. And I remember, I went out and I met with some friends. We went to a gig and had a fun night out with some friends. I kind of forgot about it, and then I came home and I lay in bed and I couldn't get to sleep, and then suddenly had this really like unbelievably explosive Bhumi opening, as all this crap that had been building up inside me for years suddenly literally just exploding out my forehead. It's like I was like literally lying in bed, like shouting, going, "Whoa, what the hell is going on?" Like it was like 10 seconds of this really powerful energy blasting out.
Really?
My head. Yeah. So that's why I say, my first Bhumi opening was very revealing, like, because it just blasted so much of that confusion out. Okay. Like it just, and I think that's why the subsequent Bhumi openings were so close to each other and required so little effort to make them open, because I think the first Bhumi opening kind of like opened a lot. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It kind of like it weakened everything. It weakened all of that confusion. With all those Bhumi layers, got a good blast from that first Bhumi opening. So then that first Bhumi opening was it was a big cessation for me. It was a massively revealing realization of Buddha nature and complete cessation of self for a few days. Like it was scary, actually. It wasn't particularly nice, because I was so used to this self being there, and suddenly it was completely gone, and I felt lost and confused and very, like, I didn't have that groundedness that would come later on when the final realization, where I had like so many years of practice and I knew what was going on. But at that first Bhumi opening, I I hadn't a clue what was going on, and it was very scary for me. You're so accustomed to this self being there all the time. It's the self is like a companion, and it's like kind of like a protector. I mean, it has a function. It is there to protect you from what you're not ready to see. And it's like it protects you from all that stuff. So when it goes like that suddenly, it's quite terrifying, actually. It certainly was for me, anyway.
It sounds an unusual account, really, from. If I think about what I read in, I get this from David Arloka's book, where he wrote that the cessation as you awake, they suggest, is about 1/5 of a second. So if yours lasted 10 seconds.
That was the 10 seconds of this intense energy exploding out of my forehead. But the cessation, that self was days. I felt like there was no grounds for me to walk on. Like I was completely just floating in this selfless, like, well, I don't know how to describe it, but it was very scary. Like, because I didn't have that like that cocoon almost of self that keeps us, protects us from reality in a way. That's what the self does. That was gone, and it was really, really quite terrifying, actually. Then the groundedness starts to come back, and that's actually really just the self coming back to kind of protect again. And then the second Bhumi opened, but the second Bhumi was because I'd gone through it already. It was much easier to deal with. It was much lighter as well. It was very light, the second Bhumi. I mean, each Bhumi opening after that was actually very different. Some were really traumatic, and some were very light, and some were very intense. And they were all totally different.
So to briefly remind people what opening and perfections of Bhumis is referring to. So Bhumi translates as ground of being, and in our subtle energy body, we have layers of Bhumis, like plates, stacked up on top of each other, that store our karmic files. 10 Bhumis contain karmic layers, and the 11th, 12th, and 13th are completely pure Mahasiddha Bhumis, all connected to the central channel, and it reveals to us our Buddha nature, this awareness being that we are. We kind of puncture holes in them, so that to begin with, we kind of see through a very small hole this experience of our Buddha nature. It's like our Buddha nature sort of seeps through. But as we puncture them through, once we finally get to the 11th Bhumi, our Buddha nature is revealed to us much more directly and is always available to us. But our whole experience isn't yet Buddha, because we still need to clear the karmic stores in the rest of the Bhumi. We've merely punctured a hole in them. So the perfections are where we continue to clear all of the karmic debris from each layer until we've cleared the final debris in the last layer, the 10th Bhumi, and we realize this empty nature of all phenomena, which is what this emptiness is that we're referring to. And emptiness is only empty of self, but it is full of life. This direct experience of life without any barriers to the experience, which is our Buddha nature.
Yeah.
So if I describe what you're talking about from your progress, from what I know, you opened the 13 Bhumis in 2.5 months, and it was sort of every 4 or 5 days that you seem to be having these openings.
Yeah, pretty much right the way through was roughly every 4 or 5 days. I mean, the 6th opened less than a day after the 5th.
Oh, wow.
It was very, very quick. And the 6th was horrible, actually. It was horrible.
Was it?
Yeah, it was really horrible. Some of them were bloody awful, like because the Bhumi opening, it reveals a lot as well. You know, it reveals like we're very kind of blind to this karmic stuff inside us. You know, we can't see it. We can't see, you know, the substrate consciousness. We can't see all this. We're totally kind of protected from it by the self, you know. But when these openings occur, they can be very revealing. And the 6th opening for me was that I suddenly, you know, got a very clear vision of the nasty karmic shit inside me, you know, the really nasty. I know it was genuinely like I've never experienced fear like this in my life. It was it was tough. Like I just opened the 5th one, just like I said, less than a day before. So I wasn't expecting it at all. It totally took me by surprise. I remember I was sitting at home. It was kind of late at night. I was about to go to bed, and I was watching some TV, and I turned off the TV and stood up, and immediately I got this vision of hell, like genuinely like suddenly being transported to hell, you know. Wow. And my body just went completely stiff, and I was like started shaking and tears pouring down my face. Like it was really terrifying. And this again, it was like literally like 10 seconds at least of this intense fear and existential pain, like severe pain. And then it all kind of drifted off, and I realized what happened. I realized, oh, okay, that was another Bhumi opening. I was not expecting that.
As I was progressing, like I was looking at someone like yours path, and you seem to know that these Bhumi openings will happen every 4 or 5 days, and it seemed a very smooth progress. And for me to put it in perspective for other people, like my route was, I didn't notice my 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, but I noticed my 5th, which was a year and 8 months after the first awakening, and the shit that I went through in that time that comes up and bubbles up. But to experience that in the short space of time that you did, so that must have been 3 or 4 weeks, whereas mine was spread over a year and a half or so.
That whatever 9 weeks, I think it was a crazy time for me. Yeah, it was really wild. Like, thankfully I wasn't busy at the time. It kind of happened around Christmas, New Year, so I didn't have much work. Like I also teach a bit. I was teaching, so during this time, it's kind of like the wrapping up for Christmas and then the Christmas holidays, and then kind of slowly getting back into the school life again after Christmas. So there was kind of like a period there where I could kind of not so much be focusing on that. I could focus on my practice, and thankfully I had that, because it was a crazy roller coaster of a period for me, like an emotional roller coaster. It was really, really intense. And the whole practice was like, I mean, by the time I perfected the 10th Bhumi, like I really I was worn out. Yeah, I was physically like I only feel like I've kind of gotten my strength and my health back in recent months. You know, I think it took the best part of a year, yeah, for me to kind of, for the emotional, for the like, I like to describe it as the selfing mechanism. It's like a machine, you know, the selfing machine. When you perfect the 10th Bhumi, the machine kind of, it switches off like boom, sound. But it's like the motor still running. It's still running and you're still experiencing all that selfing in a way, but it's just like the motor, the engine winding down. And this took a long time for me. It took yeah, the best part of a year. Now I'm at the stage where, you know, it's gone. It's shut down completely, you know, and I'm just kind of left with dealing with all that residual stuff in the body.
Should we put a bit of a timeline for people on this? So you awoke November 2017.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And so then you got through your openings very quickly in 2.5 months. And then, so the rest, was it quite a steady phase through the perfections until you awoke, which was 2021? Was it September?
I didn't revise my dates on this one, but we can. I can't remember, to be honest.
There was if I read the post,
should be in the account.
Pardon?
Oh yeah, sorry, you post. Yeah. What is that?
You wrote a cryptic post, which
love is no barriers. Is that this?
So, oh yeah, so that was on the 15th of September. But on the 5th of September, you wrote, "There never was a self. It was just me all along," with a couple of laughing faces.
Yeah. I remember this. When was that?
That was 5th of September.
Okay.
Of 2021.
I think that was just before the 10th perfected. That was like just coming near the end.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think the way I remember it is when I wrote that little poem about my love has no barriers or something.
Can I read that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So on the 15th of September 2021, my love has no barriers, no walls, no blockages. It has no path, but flows freely in all directions. It heals all suffering. It purifies all ignorance. It does not choose who receives. Its only desire is for all to be free. Yeah.
That was. I'm pretty certain that was the morning after perfection. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, actually, I get a little emotional now when I hear that, because it reminds me of that time. You know, that was because those feelings are so goddamn strong at that for me at that time. You know, that's kind of why this whole process, the healing process post 10th Bhumi, has taken such a long time, is because those emotions in me were so powerful and so kind of wild and fiery that, you know, they were kind of hard on the body, you know, they take their toll on the body, you know. And yeah, it's taken me some time to kind of ground myself within those intense emotions, you know, to be able to to be able to stay grounded, you know, and focused while all that stuff is going on. But yeah,
you lose the ground that you were standing on before, so it's
yeah, well, I guess, yeah, but it's not so much that groundedness that I was speaking of before when self was gone. That's there. Once the 10th is perfected, you're very much there. You're awake, you know, there's no seeking anymore, but you're awake, but you're present within this absolute thunderstorm of emotions, you know. That's how it was for me. Yeah, really intense. I mean, very emotional, like still feeling like I need to cry, you know, alas, you know, like this really intense emotions, you know. And that's when I wrote that, you know. I mean, that was very much when I was writing that. I don't even remember writing it, you know. It just came out in like a few seconds, you know. I just wrote it, And it was very much an expression of like someone who's just arrived, you know, has just been born into the world and just realized their purpose, you know, and just has realized this, you know, very important thing that they've been waiting to happen for a long time, and it's happened, and they now know who they are and what their purpose is. And you know, that was that's what that poem was about. Yeah, God, I'd forgotten about that one.
So then you're going through the perfection phase. So I don't know much about your journey.
Yeah, I mean,
as you began the perfections.
Funny thing for me was I was very, not that I wasn't aware of when perfections took place, but I kind of didn't care so much, you know. Not that I didn't, obviously I cared, you know, but I wasn't like, oh, is that first boom perfection, second boom perfection? Like when I was very aware when perfections took place, you know, I kind of knew when they'd taken place, but I never counted them, because I kind of realized early on that I probably got it wrong. I could be on the second, third, but I'm not really sure. So, you know, what does it matter? You know, I'm samsaric. You know, I'm still, the self-based mind is still there. I'll know when it's not there anymore. And that was exactly how it happens. You know, first, yeah, I like I said, I always knew when perfections took place. I can't put time. I have some rough dates written down of when I think certain perfections took place, but I wouldn't bother really sharing those, because I couldn't say for sure if many of them are that accurate. All I know is when the 9th happened and when the 10th happened. When the 9th happened, I initially thought it was the 10th, which I'd say is kind of possibly an experience for a lot of practitioners. When they get to the 9th, that realization of Buddhahood is very, very clear. Like, it's so clear that you know what Buddha really means. You really understand that. But there's still this slight little bit of something there that though it might initially seem that, oh, this must be the 10th Bhumi perfection, you kind of know, well, no, it can't be, because there's a little something there, because there's a little bit of uncertainty. So for me, when the 10th was perfected, there was no doubt, you know, like, even if I had asked Baba, you know, can you know, check my photo and see if I perfected, and if he had to come back to me and said, no, you've still more to go, I would have said no. I think you're wrong there, you know. I was absolutely certain of it, you know. Yeah, but yeah, when the 9th perfected, there was that kind of feeling of, oh, I think I've done this, you know. And there was this cessation for about 5 days.
Oh yeah, a cessation essentially means that the selfing mechanism has completely released itself. One experiences oneself as a Buddha for a temporary period of time, until the perfection of all 10 bhumis, where that's the complete and permanent cessation. So when a bhumi is opened, there's a very brief cessation, almost like a flash, where the Buddha nature is revealed. And usually as someone progresses further along, they've perfected a few bhumis, these experiences become longer and longer, from seconds to minutes to hours to days, and in Shane's case, several days, until one experiences the final and permanent cessation known as the first stage of Buddhahood, the realization of emptiness.
But yeah, as that cessation progressed, I kind of started to realize, no, this is nice, it's very nice, but there's something still there. And then, sure enough, it crept back in about 5 days into it, and then I had a week of the worst selfing I've ever experienced. Like, it was, I mean, people talk about,
oh really,
yeah, you know, selfing being like, you know, the swampy kind of feeling, that heavy stuff, or being, I don't know, stuck in some kind of, you know, immersed in some kind of really heavy fluid or something, or just, yeah, it was all of that, and 10 times worse than anything I'd experienced before. It was horrible. It was horrible. But, you know, obviously at that point I had a lot of insight behind me, and I knew how to deal with it. You know, I knew what it was I was dealing with. Obviously I was well acquainted with it at that stage. but it was still really heavy. It was like probably a week of intense selfing, and then it died down for a couple of days. What I would say is that at that point I realized, when that cessation was coming to an end, I realized there's at most 2 weeks before my 10th Bhumi perfects.
Oh, okay. You
I knew
that was going to happen in 2 weeks.
I knew it was going to happen in 2 weeks, and it ended up being a bit less. So I had 5 days of intense selfing, and then 5 days of cessation, then about a week of selfing, and then a couple of days of another, I wouldn't say cessation, but very, very low level selfing. I was very relaxed, very kind of resolved in myself. Very kind of content. So I knew it was about to happen. I knew that something was about to pop, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, and then it was funny actually, the 10th Bhumi perfected in very similar way to how the first Bhumi opened, but they were like opposites of each other in a sense. What happened was I went to bed, and it was roughly around the same time that the first Bhumi opened. I went to bed, and just before I went to bed, I read a little bit of that, Padmasambhava's is advice from the Lotus Born.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
But I literally read the first page, and that was it. I kind of read it and went, "Oh, I'm tired. I think I need to just go to sleep." And then it's very similar to how the first Bhumi opened. I couldn't get to sleep. I was kind of tossing and turning for a while, and then I had this experience of thoughts in my head becoming more and more intense, and it was like, whoa, geez, okay, this is a bit much. What's going on here? Like, when you have thoughts, I think a lot of one thing that, as you gain more insight, you start to really kind of understand and see how thoughts arrive and disappear within our experience. I think for someone who isn't awakened, a thought is like something that you identify completely with this thought. You can't see the trajectory, if you like, of the thought, how it arrives, and like bubbles in water, they kind of just float up like this, and so they come from somewhere and go somewhere else, and there's no identification with this thought. It's just they're just kind of objects coming and going. So I started to experience these objects, these thoughts arriving, but suddenly it was like crazy. There was loads of them, like very bubbly water, like masses of these bubbles coming up. And then what started to happen is they started to circle around this point in my forehead again, but circle faster and faster. When water is spinning into a drain, the drain hole, it circles around the drain like this. But also like when you spin a coin, and it starts to spin faster and faster until it stops. It's exactly the experience. These started to circle around this point faster and faster, and then smaller and smaller as they got faster until there was this really loud, and loud bang. Like if there was someone else in the room, I still think that possibly they would have been able to hear this. There wasn't anyone else around, but it was an implosion. So my first Bhumi opening was an explosion, and the 10th Bhumi was an implosion that just imploded right into this point here. And like as soon as it stopped and imploded into this point, it was like this really loud bang. And then that was it. I kind of opened my eyes and looked around the room and said, okay, it's done. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so I kind of like complete realization of emptiness at that point. Self completely gone. Like at that point, realizing that, okay, I thought I understood what emptiness was before, but okay, now I'm actually experiencing it. This is actually emptiness now. It's not a kind of I guess, have an idea in my head of what emptiness is. I'm genuinely experiencing it now. So yeah, that was it. Yeah, I think I probably just sat up for a while and sat in that emptiness for a while, and then just went to sleep and woke up the next day and wrote that little poem.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, that was how the 10th perfected. And the 11th, 12th, and 13th perfections were, I think it took, let's see, a few weeks. I mean, what happened was I was really tired and really kind of physically burnt out from the whole practice. So for a month or so, I didn't contact Baba. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't make any claims or anything. I just wrote those couple of little things in the Sangha page, and I'm sure.
Yeah, and then went silent, and we were all wondering.
Yeah. I totally went silent because it was tough what I was going through. Yeah, it was really. But I knew I was finished the practice, so I was kind of a little confused in a way, because like, I'm finished. I know I'm fully awakened. I know this is absolutely 10th Bhumi perfected. There's complete realization of awakened mind, absolutely clear as crystal, no bother. But I'm wrecked. I'm exhausted. I'm really my body is tired. My head hurts. My digestive system is in terrible condition. I'm just like, I'm physically in bad condition, so I contacted Kim, and we had a lovely conversation for about an hour and a half over Zoom, just chatting away. And I didn't talk about 10th Bhumi perfection at all during this conversation. It was only at the end that I kind of said to him, actually, I think I didn't want to be like, I am finished, it's done. But I kind of, I think done now with this practice. I think I'm finished. And he kind of knew already from talking to me for an hour and a half. He knew, and he said, okay, yeah. He didn't confirm anything, but then like an hour later, or half an hour later on Facebook, I see this post from Kim. Welcome, Buddha from Dublin. Shane.
He doesn't wait long, does he?
Yeah.
Headlights.
Yeah.
All flashing.
Yeah. But it was nice during that conversation. He gave me a practice for dealing with kind of healing the body, some mantras, and wow, they worked like incredibly well, well. I've never felt that kind of physical intoxication from a mantra or any kind of spiritual practice. Like, it was incredible. Like, I was chanting these mantras, but like literally like dancing around the room, like throwing my clothes off, and like just completely intoxicated by this practice. And oh my God, it took like a few days like to completely purify that stuff I was going through at that point. Really, like, took a few days. And then from that point, I was able to start doing Mahasiddha Bhumi perfection mantras, So
should we take a moment to describe what the Mahasiddha Bhumis are? The first 10 are related to our karmic files.
Yeah. The last 3 are related to Buddha, but that absolute understanding of, Buddha nature. It's not to do with your body or your emotions anymore. It's all to do with that full realization of Buddha. God, I don't even know how to put words in it.
They're completely pure, as in there's no karmic files to them. But Baba has talked about them as it's turning up the volume or activating them, activating the Buddha nature that you already have revealed. I guess that's the luminosity aspect, the aliveness aspect.
Okay.
Are we sort of getting to the right?
The luminosity, the absolute pure realization of Buddha. They are the shining light. They are the true self, if you want to call it that. They are that absolute realization. They for me were like a guiding light the whole way through my practice. And I think that's what kind of sped my practice up very quickly. During the first residential retreat we had, it was during this retreat that for me the Mahasiddha Bhumis kind of like activated. What happened was we were doing some visualizations relating to turning on those feelings of love for all beings, really kind of loving practice, to activating those feelings inside us. And at one point, I had my eyes closed doing this practice, and this little light appeared above my head, like the Mahasiddha Bhumi. Like how many meters are they above there's a what does Kim
6 meters or so?
Yeah,
is the 13th.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that turned on, like a little light turned on. Yeah, it was 11th turned on first. And when I say it turned on, I mean like literally like someone turned a light on above my head. It wasn't.
Oh wow. It
wasn't an imaginary thing. Like it wasn't. And that's what shocked me with it so much, because it was like I was seeing something in my peripheral vision, but it was meters above my head. So it was actually just me being able to see this Mahasiddha Bhumi turned on. And then
was this whilst you were in your perfection phase? You'd already opened.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'd opened up, but it was early. It was early on. If I had perfected any at this stage, I'm not even sure. I might have had 1 or 2 perfections at this stage, but it was quite early on in the practice. So the activation of these Mahasiddha Bhumis, literally like someone flicked a switch and a light turned on above my head. And 10 minutes later, the 12th turned on. And then another 10 minutes later, the 13th turned on. But the 12th was a little bit fainter than the 11th, and the 13th was barely visible. Like it was only just a very mild light. And these lights stayed on for right up until, I'd say, 7th or 8th Bhumi perfection. So a couple of years I had these lights above my head. I didn't need to close my eyes and zone into them or anything. They were just above my head all the time, these Mahasiddha Bhumis. So they were kind of like, it was like a guiding light, that was there all the time, guiding me through the practice, and there as a kind of a source of healing energy, and something that I could connect with when I was doing the practices. That was immensely kind of powerful, healing, and I guess my understanding of the whole practice, and it was guiding me the whole time, like teaching me, like a master there beside me teaching me all the time. But I can't see these lights anymore now, because I don't need to see them. They're it's completely realized everywhere. There's no Mahasiddha Bhumis there anymore. They're everywhere. They're me. They're fully kind of realized, and I don't know. It's just my clear experience of reality now. There's no need to connect with anything anymore. But yeah, these lights turned on, and the 11th was brightest, the 11th, the 12th was less bright, and the 13th was a little less bright. And this related exactly to how long it took to perfect those as well. Like the 13th, like I said, the light was very, very, it was barely on. There was only a slight kind of perception of a little bit of light there. And when I went to do the techniques for perfecting those Bhumis, the 13th took me about 10 seconds. It was.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. It was. I just said the mantra like twice, and then suddenly realized, oh, it's done. It was like sorry.
That's the Pure Lanjana mantra for the 13th Bhumi. Yeah. Zangyalpo.
Yeah. It was like brushing some dust off a table or something, like or blowing a couple of cobwebs away. That's all that was there. Then the 12th then perfected next. That happened about a week after the 13th, and then the 11th about 2 weeks after that.
It's a note here because it might be confusing to people that Bhumis can be perfected in reverse after the 10th perfection. So in every single case so far, all the Bhumis from 1 to 10 have been opened and perfected in order. They have karmic stores, and so the holes need to be punctured in an order and then cleared in an order, so it seems. But then Bhumis 11, 12 and 13, the supposed Mahasiddha Bhumis, are perfectly pure, free from any karmic traces. So once we've got rid of this top layer, the shell of selfing that surrounds us, then Bhumis 11, 12 and 13 apparently can be done in any order.
and each of them had a very, very different experience to them. Like the 13th was this very kind of effortless, like blowing dust off something. The 12th was when it perfected, it was this really, really beautiful feeling of euphoria just washing through the body. Like it was very physically related. This 12th Bhumi was very connected to the body, you know, and so there was this incredibly uplifting, euphoric wash of energy through the body. And then the 11th was that final realization, the final understanding of the samsaric mind, of the selfing machine, if you like. I suddenly saw that selfing machine. I saw exactly what it was, the shape of it, the size of it. I saw it as this machine that had completely shut down. It was still there, but it was not functioning anymore.
Okay.
And that's, that I kind of realized that this is like literally like an object, a machine that is kind of churning out these illusions that kind of keep us in this kind of state of ignorance that can be blissful or whatever, but it just protects us from reality. But that, I had this vision of this selfing machine, and also a very clear kind of vision of other people's samsaric confusion. It was a really, really funny experience, because I suddenly kind of saw the kind of complete ridiculousn's of this samsaric confusion and the suffering that people go, the samsaric kind of suffering that people go through, and how pointless and silly it is, how people behave, and how I behaved when I was stuck in this illusion. And it just became, it was absolutely hilarious realization for me. I realized at this point, you know those little Buddha statues, the fat Buddha with the laughing face. I understood at this point what this Buddha was laughing at. You know, he's not laughing because, oh, he's happy and he's free and he's enlightened and all this stuff. No, he's literally laughing at how stupid this mind is. Like, it's like the funniest thing in the world. Like when I saw it, like I laughed for half an hour nonstop. Like,
did you?
It was killing me at the end of it, and I wasn't thinking about what I was just laughing at this samsaric mind. It was only at the end of it, after this, when this fits of laughter died down, that I realized, oh my God, okay, that's what happened. I just perfected the last Bhumi, and I have totally clear understanding of what the self-based mind is. And
it's quite interesting, because Vajrasattva is obviously connected to the 11th, and at the end of his long 100-syllable mantra, he laughs, doesn't he? Ha ha ha, ho ho ho.
Okay. Yeah, and, see, I didn't know that.
That's because of the ridiculousness of the samsaric.
That's exactly
condition.
how I experienced it. Yeah, it's exactly how I experienced it. At that moment, realizing, how silly and pointless and ridiculous this samsaric suffering is. Like, it's hilarious. Like when you experience this, you're just gonna laugh. Ha 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 ho ho. For a good while, and then that'll be it. You know, you'll have complete clear understanding of what this selfing machine is, and how unnecessary it is, but also how necessary it is as well. You know, it is there. It's not something that we are fighting with or struggling with, or something that we have to get rid of. What we do ultimately have to get rid of it to kind of progress, but it has a function, and it has it's very necessary function. So to struggle with it and to have any feelings of hatred towards it are just completely, it's pointless and counterproductive, I guess. You know, you have to learn to love the self-based mind. You have to learn to love the self. You have to, I guess for me, you know, very early on in my practice, I was hit with this realization of how incredibly amazing the self is. How, like, wow, you know, this thing that just generates this incredibly beautiful and believable illusion of me and of my experience. And, you know, it's incredible. I just became so fascinated with how beautiful it was, and how complex and just yeah, mind-blowing it was. And this was a big thing for me. This really helped me with my practice, because I never struggled with it, the self, from that point onwards. I mean, I struggled with it because, you know, it was difficult at times, but I always knew what I was struggling with, and I always knew that I wasn't fighting against, you know, something that wasn't there to make my life difficult. It was actually there to help, you know, to support me. You know, it genuinely needs to be there, and it only stops needing to be there when you stop needing it. And that's what this practice is. You know, it's a process of getting to the point where you no longer need the self. It's not about fighting to get rid of the self. It's about gaining that insight of Buddha nature. When that insight is clear and fully understood, then the self just drops away because it's no longer needed. So you're not getting rid of it. It just goes when it's not needed. You know, and that's an important thing to realize. It's only there because you're holding on to it. You know, because you, whether you realize it or not, you need it, and you're holding on to it, and you're not ready to let go of it. You know, So I think isn't there a story where the Buddha talks about it being like holding on to a burning coal or something like this. Yeah, there's some story like that comes to mind. And, you know, all you have to do is let go, you know, but we're kind of not ready to let go. You need to be ready to really see what's going on and know that actually I can just let go. But why haven't I letting go? You know, that's the tricky thing to see, you know. What am I suffering, and why am I suffering, and do I need to hold on? Yeah, it's just a process. That's what this practice is a process of seeing what self is, seeing the true nature of self, and realizing that it doesn't need to be there. But it does need to be there until it's realized that it doesn't need to be there, you know. Yeah, it's kind of it's just that's a process of just seeing that self. Like you were saying, you know, my first Bhumi opening, there was a very clear understanding of self from that point. So I realized very early on that this thing that I'd been experiencing wasn't actually who I was. It wasn't me at all. It was illusion, and it was like, it was like a dream, you know. That I was kind of still identifying with this dream a bit, but I realized that it wasn't me. So I knew there was no point, there was no need for it to be there. And this realization of it not needing to be there is very much what just lets it just drop away, because it doesn't need to be there. Why is it there? You know, once it's realized that it doesn't need to be there, then it doesn't need to be there. So all that difficult stuff that comes up, all that stuff that we struggle with in the practice, that samsaric confusion and the dark nights and all this, you know, it's just a self-based mind. It's kind of like it can't touch you or hurt you in any way, you know. It's kind of,
this is part of what I was saying when you seem to realize things very early on. If I looked at a discussion about dark nights, maybe you were still quite in the early days of your perfections, and people were talking about how they experienced such difficult dark nights, and me myself, like gone through the ring and dark nights, but even in this stage, sort of mid perfections, it's like I still get so caught in the dark nights, and it's you seem to have this understanding that of not beating the self up. It's like you're getting drawn back in that story again, but you realized.
You know what, I think this goes back also to as a child, I used to have like horrific nightmares as a kid, that were generally like nightmares about being eaten by monsters, you know, like really, really kind of vivid, painful nightmares about being, devoured by large, horrible, terrifying monsters. Yeah. And at one point I realized, okay, this just keeps happening. It's the same thing over and over and over. Like I run away from this monster, it catches me and it eats me. Same thing every time. Something's gotta change here. So I just started letting the monsters eat me, Yeah. And this kept on going. It was a recurring dream of being eaten by monsters, but the progression was that I realized that it's actually considerably less painful when you actually just let them eat you, and actually got to the point where it isn't painful at all. Like it's perfectly fine. And then after a while, what would happen is these monsters or various characters. I used to have a recurring dream of Freddy Krueger, this guy with the knives in his. Yeah. After a while, what would happen is, Freddy would turn up in my dreams and try to be all scary and everything, and I'd just say, "Oh, listen, man, come on, yeah, we're not going to do this again. And let's just sit down and have a chat." And every time,
cup of tea together.
Totally, yeah, we'd sit down. I'd sit down and have a cup of tea or a beer with Freddy Krueger, and we'd just be the best of friends, So there was this kind of realization in me from an early stage that there's no good running from this stuff. You got to sit with it. You got to let it run its course. You got to let it do what it has to do. And this is very much the case with, dark nights and any of this kind of suffering. You have to just immerse yourself in it. You just have to let it just run its course, do what it has to do. Like me as a kid, just saying, okay, I'm just going to lie here and let this monster devour me. That's what is going on with these dark nights. You have to let them devour you. You have to like completely immerse yourself in them. Absolutely 100%. Not struggle with them. Just breathe and let it wash over you. Let it. Yeah, I mean, that was what got me through the practice very quickly as well, in a way, because whenever I experienced selfing, and whenever I experienced any of this difficult stuff, I didn't run from it. I always actually kind of I embraced it. I let it happen. I was happy when I saw this stuff coming up, because I realized, okay, here's the practice, here's where I go. Like all this stuff, all this samsaric stuff, it's the guru guiding you. It's your path. This stuff, you have to, when it comes up, you have to literally like just diving into a pool or something. You dive into it and you let it immerse you. And this sounds difficult, but actually it's much easier than constantly running from it and struggling with it. This is way more difficult, and obviously ultimately way less effective. Well, it's not effective at all, really. Actually, you have to you have to let it run its course. All this stuff, you'll have to let it do what it wants to do. All these dark nights and all this samsaric stuff within you, it's there for a reason. It's your path. You have to let it do what it wants to do, and stop wanting it to be something else, or stop trying to follow a path as such, or rather let the path kind of guide you in a way, because you have a guide. You have a guru there that's guiding you all the time, whether you realize it or not. The guru is there all the time guiding, and this is the way the guru guides through, like almost like pushing you, guiding you through your samsaric stuff. Makes, okay, this samsaric crap over here are going to push Chris in this direction, and Chris is going to deal with this stuff, and then I'm going to push him over in this direction. And this is what the guru is doing all the time. But if you get to this samsaric stuff and you go, oh, this is really nasty. No, I'll just this is it's just going to make the whole process take so much longer, and ultimately so much more painful. You're just prolonging the suffering. So with dark nights or any of this stuff, you just gotta, I mean, it's easier said than done, I guess, just letting this stuff kind of wash over you and letting it just run its course. It's a difficult thing to do, but have you ever had the experience of you know, if you're trying to get to sleep at night and you're lying in bed and you can't get to sleep and you're frustrated, and there's a lot of pent up energy inside you preventing you from falling asleep. Well, if you try to just lie there and no matter what comes up, you just stay as physically as calm as you possibly can be. And what happens, what I've noticed in the past is that this energy that's preventing you from getting to sleep, it becomes more and more and more intense the calmer you are. But then it's like a fire when it's burning out, it's at its brightest and then it dies down, you know. So that's kind of what this stuff is. You've got to just sit there and let it burn and become more and more and more intense, and then it just fizzles out. But if you keep struggling with it, it never gets to this point where it can just become really, really intense. It always just stays at this low level suffering that traps you in this kind of state of I guess getting nowhere. You know, you have to let it become really, really intense, and you have to know how to be completely calm within that fire, like immersing yourself in the fire. So that experience of lying in bed and letting those feelings come up, this is very similar to this experience of dealing with this karmic stuff. You have to, yeah.
That's a nice way to describe things. If I'm trying to learn from this, that gives me a bit more of an idea. If I try and describe a dark night for people who might not quite understand what it's about, we describe dark nights as it's part of a spiritual cycle, right? Where you have an opening of some sort, and you might go through a period of clarity, but then the junk starts falling back in. The guru is perhaps the tantra that we're doing, the mantras are shaking stuff up again, and new stuff is revealed to us, and we get this existential dread kind of thing that comes back in because the stuff's bubbling up from our subconscious and we have to deal with it now, and the self wants to run away from it, wants to push it away. So it's definitely an experience as you go along the path that gradually you realize that becomes worthless. The more you push it away, the more painful it becomes. But in my case, it's a long time coming to get to this realization. But the earlier you can realize that, the more you let that fire come, the quicker it fizzles out in the end.
Yeah. So I think that, for me was, like I said, having those nightmares as a kid and realizing how to deal with that stuff. That was very much me practicing already at an early age and knowing how to deal with karmic stuff before I actually had to do it. Well, I guess in a way I was dealing with it back in those days, but without the insight yet. Yeah. But you've described it very well there. You know, it's all that stuff. Yeah, coming back after insight, after that maybe period of cessation or just kind of release from karmic suffering, and then it kind of it churns all that stuff back up again, and you have to. And sometimes it can be really, really intense, but it should be the case that as you get more insight, you just become more skilled at dealing with it. It's not that it becomes lighter. I think that's the misconception for a lot of people. As you go through Bhumi perfections, that the selfing becomes lighter. It's not.
I had a period where I thought, okay, I'm getting used to dark nights now. It's feeling easier, and that's you're getting carried away with that idea, and then when it hits you again, you're a bit shocked by it.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely can see that a lot with practitioners, that this tendency to think that they're nearly finished the practice because, you know, they're not dealing with much selfing at all, and everything's really clear and light, and I must be nearly finished, or and this is it's kind of what's not a good idea, to be honest. Practice wise, it's not a good idea to think that you're nearly finished, you know, because there is no nearly finished. I mean, there is no realization of Buddhahood. None of this stuff actually happens, you know. I guess it's hard to put words to it at this moment, but if you think that you're nearly finished the practice, if you think that there's not much left to deal with, that selfing, that the selfing dying down is somehow you coming to the end of a practice, then this is really actually just another little trick of the self. You know, it's like I talk about the selfing mechanism creating this kind of like cocoon of that to protect us from reality. Like this, we are inside this, like literally it's like this shape, the selfing, that it creates this dome around us, and it kind of traps us in this kind of, I guess in a way, a kind of blissful state of ignorance. And this can appear to be like, feel like, oh, you know, I've realized, you know, I have gained this ultimate realization of reality, or it can feel like there's very little left to deal with. But this is always just this being inside this protective layer that is kind of blocking you from seeing what remains, blocking you from that remaining samsaric confusion. And you kind of have to be able to see beyond that cocoon. You know, you have to kind of be able to see the kind of illusory nature of this cocoon, and how it's really kind of actually just preventing you from seeing that. Well, in some cases there may actually not be very much left, but you know, whether there is
a few practitioners have seemed to get kind of stuck.
The
ninth and 10th and be there for a long time.
That's why you can fly through the first 9 Bhumis, and the 10th can take years, you know, because of this thing. You get trapped in this kind of this little self bubble that and you see it like with lots of, you know, if I go on YouTube and look up, you know, spiritual teachers, you know, who clearly aren't Buddhists, you know, but they have insight and they have awakenings, you know. But at some points, they just identify with the insight that they have. They identify with this little bubble, you know, that they're living inside, and within this bubble, it's completely free of selfing. But they don't realize that they're completely just immersed in this self-based illusion. But they can have, you know, they have this personality of someone that's possibly a Buddha, or you know, really realized or whatever, you know, and it's really just an act. It's just them living inside a bubble in which there appears to be no self-based confusion remaining, but it's just a very, very effective protective layer from what is left for them. So yeah, when I see people kind of behaving this way, like they're realized, you know, nearly finished their practice, and they feel like, oh yes, I'm very calm, I really understand Buddha nature, I feel very grounded and all this. I always just think, no, it's bullshit. Yeah. It's total bullshit. I mean, my final, like I was talking about that last period of selfing I had, you know, when I was perfecting the 10th Bhumi, that was the most horrific selfing I've been through. Like, it wasn't like when I was getting to the end of the process that it became easier for me. It didn't. It was really, really intense experience. So it shouldn't be this like that the selfing machine only winds down when the switch is turned off, and that switch only turns off when the 10th is perfected. So that selfing machine is going full throttle, you know, the whole way, you know. So you shouldn't be it shouldn't feel like you're nearly finished, or like you're about to attain Buddhahood. But at the same time, like it was for me, I realized the 10th Bhumi was about to perfect, but I didn't feel like I was about to I don't know, become a Buddha, or, you know, become enlightened or anything like this. I just realized that a process I was going through that had stages to it was about to end, you know. And when this whole process came to an end, I realized that there never was a process, that there never were Bhumis, there never was a self, you know. It was all just complete illusion. You know, like it's like any illusion, you know. Before you see that it's an illusion, you think it's real, you know. So it doesn't matter if it's a magician doing a magic trick and you look at what he's doing and you go, wow, that's like real, you know. But then when you figure out what he's doing, it's like, oh, okay, it's not real. So in the case of this stuff, you know, when the 10th is perfected, you look back over your whole life and you think back into your memories, and there's no self anywhere. Like it's completely, like, I mean, I can think back in my past and I can, you know, remember the way I was behaving and see that was selfing, but there's no self there. You know, there's nothing there. Like I can't even remember what self feels like. I can't remember. I know what the selfing machine is. I know what it was doing. I understand that aspect of it perfectly, but I don't remember what it felt like. I don't remember what it looked like, because there's nothing to remember. You know, it's gone, or it never was there. You know? I know this probably sounds completely far out to someone who's still finishing the practice, because there's still that illusion is still, you're still somewhat immersed in this belief of this illusion. But when it clicks, when it disappears, then it was never there. So, I mean, you read about this in texts as well all the time, talking about non-existent, that there's a path, but actually the path doesn't exist. And this is totally the case. You know, it was never there. Yeah.
It sounds like you're making the point that it's quite binary all the way to the very end. It's still, you're either in selfing samsaric or you're not, and it's literally like the switch at the end. It's like, well, now it's not.
Absolutely, yeah.
But before that, it always is, as it were, and you're not letting it go. You think it's subtle, and you're falling for this illusion that you haven't got much left, but it's still on.
Yeah. There's no this like, people think about it being this process of it is helpful to think of the path as being a process of gradually clearing out that confusion. This is a technique that helps you to get through the path, but you realize at the end that this wasn't taking place at all. There was no gradual disintegration of self-based mind. The self-based mind was there or it wasn't there. It's like you say, it's binary. It's either there or it's not there. It's a switch. You switch it off, and when it's switched off, at the end, you know that it can't be switched back on. It's finished, because you kind of realize even that there is no switch. You know, there's nothing there. You know, nothing can be. There's no mechanism to turn it back on again. It's just off. So that's the practice. It's either the samsaric mind is either there or it's not there. So if it's there, you know, where is it? What is it? You know, look at it. You know, immerse yourself in it. Know that it's illusion, but at the same time see it. Be able to see the illusion. And just look at it, observe it all the time, sit with it, live it, you know, but know it for what it is.
So this was something that has confused me ever since the start, because I read The Power of Now, and you see Eckhart Tolle, and he seems so calm and relaxed, and more lately I've been thinking about it as I've progressed a little bit, and I'm having this realization, and the realization has grown, as it were. But I just can't relate to the idea of being on part of the path and then just thinking you're there, you're enlightened. And I guess this was a lot of the doubts that came through before, because it was so clearly I'm samsaric, but apparently I am progressing. So it's quite confusing to think that in the early stages. But now I'm seeing things a bit more clearly. I'm starting to realize that, okay, there is truth to this path. And that actually, if the path keeps you humble, if you're practicing effectively, it keeps you very, very humble. And you can't, if you're practicing right, you can't go off into the blissful states and believe you're it, because you're faced. You're entrusting the guru to help you face these samsaric elements that you need to face in order to overcome them.
I mean, the path is an absolutely necessary technique for guiding you. It's like it's the guru's way of guiding you through this process. So people who have had awakenings, and then they become these spiritual teachers who people think are, you know, these supremely realized beings, and it's just nonsense, because they've completely.
And then they start saying there is no path, there is no.
Yes,
and it confuses everyone.
Totally confusing, and they've confused themselves as well. You know,
Yeah.
they're completely confused, because they've disregarded important techniques for reaching this final realization. They've disregarded a path. They've had a realization of the non-existence of self, and they just identified with this realization. You know, it's not. They haven't seen the non-existence of self, but at the same time gone, but self is there. I can see it, you know. So I might be able to say, I may understand that self doesn't exist, but I can bloody well see it. It's there.
Yeah.
I'm clearly confused. So here's my path. You know, this is what I need to do. I need to focus on this remaining self, and I need to, just watch it and watch it and watch it until there's none of it left. But to have insight, that initial insight, and then just go off, you know, completely get distracted from the path by that realization. It's a very common thing. And we're very lucky in this Sangha that we have these techniques that keep us on this path, that we don't go off on a tangent about the non-existence of self. We just stick with a practice that keeps churning up this self.
Yeah.
So
then I wanted to come to this point where you had this very difficult time. Perhaps it was at the ninth Bhumi. There was something of your mindset that seemed like you were actually very ready to experience that and understood what it was when it came up. But then it's an awful lot to go through very quickly by the time you perfect the 10th. So all these emotions that you were going through.
It was a lot to go through. Like I said, it was very hard on my body. It was very hard on my mind. This realization of non-existence of self is a tough thing for the body and the mind to go through, because we believe that it exists, and it's our anchor, it's our friend, it's our home, you know. And when it's that constant breaking down and constantly seeing through this illusion, constantly reminding the body and the mind of this illusory nature of this thing, it's tough on the body. It really it hurts, you know, because we are constantly being reminded that, you know, everything we believed in is not true. This is a very, very difficult thing to go through, and especially to go through it in a very short space of time is incredibly difficult. And, you know, like I was saying, you know, it was a year or a year or more of me of kind of like dealing with this trauma in the body just, you know, still hasn't quite caught up with the realization that now kind of exists in the mind. But for me, it's like the mind is fully awake. The mind is like absolutely present, connected with Guru. So it's like having a Guru there beside me all the time. I don't like it's like having a teacher there beside you, right there, 24 hours a day beside you all the time. So when the body is having difficulty, when the brain is having difficulty, kind of understanding is struggling with it, the teacher is always there to impart knowledge, to teach, you know, immediately. Like, so there doesn't need to be a struggle anymore. So the healing process takes place very quickly, or relatively quickly. It's not that. But,
so you went through this really difficult bit just before. I kind of, at the time of reading, you wrote a post that you felt ungrounded a little while before. Sort of, that was mid-August, I think.
Okay. What did I say?
Shall I remind you a little bit?
Yeah, please. It's all a blur.
It was a bit of a post, but you put you wrote about you can't find your footing. Awareness is so broad and selfless that it almost scares me.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's terrifying, you know, when that mind is awake, or maybe it was just prior to the full waking up of the mind, but it's terrifying, you know, because it's this realization is this non-existence of self, and you're just open, like there's no protective layer anymore. It's scary. It is scary. That's
I sort of imagined it as when the Buddha was sitting under the tree, and there's Mara in front of him, and the Mara's armies are firing all the arrows at him, and as they come, they turn into flowers. But he still has to go through that final battle.
Yeah,
but then a little further on, then you had this realization. And then I'm wondering, so it sounded like there was an element which it felt really good, and you wrote the post about the love is only there to wish everyone else to be free.
Yeah.
And how much was there a sense of relief in that? Is that what you feel at that time?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean,
so you've got kind of two things that sound like they're going on, that you've got some really difficult emotions going on, but
it's funny, you know,
release.
Yeah. There's all this, you could say there's relief, you know, and there's you know, this desire for all beings to be free, and you know, these words might indicate that I was suffering or having difficulty at these different points in the practice, but I was never suffering, you know, I was never having difficulty at all. You know, it's because when you stop identifying with this stuff, it just there's no self there. So if there appears to be suffering, there isn't suffering. You know, it's just, it appears that way to others. Even, you know, whether I'm writing about it or whether I'm speaking about it, it can appear that way, but it's not actually suffering. I guess how does that relate to your question again? Was there a specific question, or?
Yeah, well, I was asking it at the feeling of relief that goes on. But what was this time like? Because you had this sense of relief, and you had these difficult emotions going on, and this huge flow of release, and these nice feelings. So just how was it for you at the time? And other people have found this quite difficult to try and describe how, well, you have feelings, but they're not your feelings.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not your suffering anymore. You know that your body has been traumatized.
Yeah. But I just see it as a body that has been traumatized by a process that it's been to, and it needs more time to heal. So there's an element of suffering there, but yes, there's also this relief that this process is finished in a way, or at least this initial stage of the process is finished. So there's a mixture of all kinds of emotions there, but there's never anybody there that's happy or joyful or upset or suffering or any of this. It's like it's just emotional energy that flows, and thoughts arise and all this stuff. But yeah, there's nobody there that's experiencing this stuff.
So it sounds like there's kind of a storm of emotions going on, but there's complete calmness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like just sitting in a storm and observing a storm taking place. That if I am there at all, I'm just sitting there watching this storm taking place. And this storm is kind of like also a necessary part of the process, you know, that the body still has to come to terms with what has happened. It still has to realize, you know, this the selfing machine is this, you know, like this machine that generates this cloud of illusion and this mess of kind of identification and yeah, it's just a mess, but it's a kind of a necessary mess to keep you, I guess, grounded in this kind of safe place. You know, when this stuff is gone, there's still a self in a way. You know, people talk about the realization of true self. I don't like this term because it still uses the word self. I'm not crazy about it.
Kind of, there's not many words you can use, are there? So that we end up going to that one.
But that's why I still like to use the word me, because like when I opened the first Bhumi, I realized, I can be me now. But I didn't realize that all this stuff was going to come back in. But then when I perfected the 10th Bhumi, then it was like, yes, okay, now I'm actually me. But this me is also an illusion.
Yeah.
Oh, this is there's still, so it's like, that's the kind of that initial realization of Buddha, is that all that selfing stuff is gone, but I'm still here. so what's that about? Like, it took me a few months to see that. I was still kind of like going through this healing process in my body, and then one day it dawned on me, wait a minute, there's still a self. Like, it's still me. I'm here. There's no confusion anymore. There's no there's no self-based confusion anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm here. So this is the next stage of the process. Okay, now I understand. This has to be seen through. You know, this has to be realized in the body, realized in the mind. This that actually this final true self is just as illusory as the illusion that the self-based mind was generating. But this is a tricky one, you know, because it feels a lot more solid. You know, the self-based mind is like, you know, it's very light, and when you see what's actually going on, it's just like, it doesn't have that density to it, that realness to it. But this final self that needs to be seen through is much stronger. It's much thicker, denser, and it takes a lot more time. But the one major difference now for me is that, like I was talking about, this guru realization, this guru that's there all the time, like teaching me all the time. There's no need, in a way, there's no need to practice at all, because everything I do is the practice, because the teacher's just there guiding all the time. So that really makes this process so much easier. This final one self that I have to see through. It's inevitable that it'll just drop away. And I have had lots of cessations of self. Some for hours and hours. But the nice difference with this cessation at this point is that when the self-based mind, when you have cessations of the self-based mind, there's the self there noticing these cessations of the self-based mind. But when there's a cessation of this singular self, you don't even notice it. You don't. It's only when you start to notice it that the cessation has ended. You know. So it's like you completely don't even know what's happening. Hours and hours and hours go by where you're just completely existing, and there's absolutely nobody there yet. You're functioning optimally throughout the day, and then you realize after a certain amount of time, oh wait, that was the cessation. But you don't realize while it's happening. It's kind of funny like that. But yeah, that's the kind of final stage of the process. That process of realizing, you know, attaining rainbow body, or what other names you want to give it. It's just that cellular transformation within the body. You know, the body kind of actually realizing what it is, and who it isn't, or you know, realizing that it's just how would I put it? Yeah, realizing the non-existence of self throughout body and mind. You know, that the body is still kind of ignorant a little bit, and still it's like that self-based mind has conditioned the body. So the self-based mind is gone, but the body has been conditioned by a lifetime of this self-based mind being there, and it's not ready to realize. It needs to go through a process. Realizing.
So we've chatted about this in a few of the interviews now, and I'm going to chat about it with Amrita Simha as well soon. But this is definitely a very confusing point to the samsaric being who's not enlightened yet. I've chatted to enough people now that I'm starting to kind of get an idea of this. So you've talked about you're seen through the self, but there's a self still there. But you're talking about that the self of the mind. We sort of separate the mind as in the nadis, the realization of emptiness, which is to realize there's no inherent permanent solid nature of a self. You're seeing everything completely clearly within emptiness, but it's the body. There's something about the body where the body hasn't. There's you talk of it as echo karmas, as the word.
The way I see it, a lot of people use this, echoes, karmic echoes within the body. the way I see it is, yeah, it's just like the body has been conditioned by this self-based mind, and it needs to go through a process. It's like realization up to the 10th Bhumi, where we realize the non-existence of self in the non-physical realm. Okay, and then now the second stage of the process is to realize it in the physical realm, which is the body.
Yeah.
So there's two stages, you know. The second stage is, yeah, there's non-physical and physical realm. That's the way I see it. The physical realm is that final stage of it, and you have to purify that conditioning that has taken place through that non-physical confusion. Yeah.
So we'll go back to the first month of how did this process sort of unravel itself within the first month, which it sounded like a fairly a big storm going on. But then does it calm down after that, and how does it all feel?
Yeah. So it kind of feels like there's just, the body is really traumatized. There's a lot of trauma trapped in the body, and you're trying to release it through whatever way you can. I did some things that were maybe, so had some practices like meditation practices and mantras and stuff like that, but I think mainly it's just living a life in a way that allows you to release this stuff. Like I play drums for a living. I do a lot of climbing, and I think I'm good at, I know how to release this stuff from my body, because I've been doing it kind of all my life in a way. So yeah, so for me it's not necessarily as much about sitting and meditating or doing it. It's really just about doing whatever you can to release this stuff from the body. But I mean, that's the initial stages. I kind of feel like I've been going to that for a while now, and now I'm ready to actually start really practicing again. But it's up to this point, I've really just been kind of letting the guru kind of just guide me, and kind of just listening and seeing what lessons I can absorb from the guru, and just kind of feeling my way through this process and just releasing this stuff from my body, so that the body is now ready to start kind of really absorbing that realization from the mind. But the body will struggle to absorb that realization if it's still struggling with trauma, So it's a process of, it's like I said, the first few months it was a very chaotic stage for me, where there was this trauma in the body, and I was really, on edge all the time, and really kind of a lot of anxiety, and it was a very difficult stage for me.
So is it kind of on edge? I chatted to Sylvia, she felt a little bit like that as well. And is it a sense that this thing that kind of protected you before, but now there's no barrier to the outside world anymore? Yeah,
it's like you're totally kind of, you feel like naked, like you really feel really what's the word, vulnerable. That protective layer is gone, and you're left with this body that is like traumatized. That's the only way to put it, really. I mean, it's going to be slightly different for different practice. I'm sure it will be quite different for different practitioners, but for me, it was because the process was very quick. I was really traumatized after it, and I really had to kind of like not think about practicing as such, but just kind of like, sit with my guru and try to just let life kind of run its course, and let this stuff just kind of release from my body.
You talked about being very sensitive as well, like you had this high sensitivity, and do you think in a way that came from the practice, whereas before you didn't used to practice, but now you've done all this practice and you've opened yourself out?
The being set to your environments, that's just what happens when this protective layer is gone. Like suddenly you're naked to the universe, you're like, everything is there in front of you, and it's really kind of it's kind of scary initially.
You said about almost feeling like you've been born again.
Absolutely. That's the way I think of it. This is like a new life for me. It's like when a baby is born into the world, that's a newborn baby, a fresh life, but they're scared. They don't know what's going on. They're crying and they're completely clueless of why they're there, how it happened, or it's kind of like that in a way. It's just like being born again, but maybe like you're obviously a lot more clued in. You're very awake, very aware, but you feel like a completely fresh person that needs to return to this process of figuring out what the hell is going on here. What this is all about. And that's what it's been like for me. I don't feel like a newborn baby anymore. I feel like someone who actually kind of has a clue what's going on. I feel like there's a lot more to go, but I feel like I'm more grounded now. Like I've dealt with a lot of that trauma within the body. And
is it a good over a year and a half now that you sort of settled into this?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of I've gone through quite a few different kind of, I still describe them as perfections. I don't know, haven't really talked to Baba about this, even if there is kind of a map yet as such for this stage, but the way it feels to me, like I'm still going through perfections. But that these are kind of like, as this transformation starts to take place in the body, this realization of Buddha nature within the body, that a cellular transformation takes place, and when these shifts happen, they can feel sometimes like shifts as they did before, but also they can sometimes feel like perfections, where you get to another stage where you've arrived at another stage of kind of the path, if you like.
Is this like an onion sort of?
No, it's like the onion is like, it's like the self, this layer that as we kind of have perfection.
Can't use that analogy.
No, I don't think that works. No, it's literally just like there's a body here, and I can feel in various places of the body where this transformation takes place. Like initially I would feel it in various parts of my gut, transformations taking place, and then sometimes it would feel like it's just across the whole body. And I think these full body realizations are kind of, it's like a perfection. I had a couple of them in quick succession around the end of last year, one actually on Christmas Day, and they are pretty phenomenal experiences. Like when this is realized in the body, like it's I've never felt this kind of energy and aliveness in the body. It's incredible. Like,
sounds good.
Oh, it's better than good. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, because now not only is the mind free of all this suffering, but the body is starting to realize this ultimate realization, and it's like the cells in the body just start to fire up. Energy that you didn't realize you have, strength you didn't realize you have, suddenly turns on. And it's an incredibly healthy and healing feeling.
Oh, good.
It's pretty far out. But like I said, it kind of, I first started having this experience not that long after the 10th Bhumi, where I started to feel like in various parts of my gut that there was this rainbow body was starting to like turn on. This light was starting to turn on in the body. And
does it feel like that for you? You sense light in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like lights turning on in the body. That you feel like, cells within the body are starting to transform into something, into this ultimate realization of Buddha. These cells transform. And sometimes it can be kind of, again, slightly traumatic even on the body, because there's conflict within the body of cells that haven't realized and cells that are realizing, and there can be that kind of little bit of conflict as well in the body. But then, like I was speaking about, the stages where I feel like there were perfections, it's just like the whole body realizes, and that's when the body is completely accepting of this transformation. So it'd be interesting to talk to Baba about this and see if he has some kind of early stages of a map or something for this.
I don't think too much from the sounds of it, but I've heard people talk of similar experiences to you of the feeling of a cessation. So others have had sort of relatively short cessations, but for long enough to sort of realize something about those cessations. But various people, Bubba and Helena, have definitely talked about specific locations.
Yeah.
Bubba at the base of his spine, a big
That's
release
right.
occur from there. Helena somewhere else, maybe in the gut or something,
Yeah.
or somewhere in a solar plexus.
Right. Yeah, I've had just a couple of different places in, like, literally, like in my lower intestine, two different spots around the lower intestine, and one around the solar plexus, and then also one around the head. A couple around the head area. One around the front, one around near the back in the center.
You feel it inside your head at all?
So yeah. Actually, literally in the brain.
Yeah.
It's like a healing of cells within the body in this transformation. Like, it's like cells that were maybe even like dying off suddenly realize this ultimate realization. Like, they transform into this absolutely pure, optimally perfected cell. It's a beautiful feeling. Yeah, it's a really beautiful feeling. So, I mean, yeah, when I started experiencing this stuff, it was a few months after I perfected the 10th Bhumi. And it was at that point that I actually, I had left the Sangha. I left the Sangha for a few months. And then I started getting these experiences, and I realized, okay, there's more work to be done here.
Because I did get the sense that, like, that was it for you. The guru had taught you everything that you could be taught.
Yeah. That's what I felt. I felt like, that's it. What else is there to be realized? And I was right in a sense that, the mind is fully awake, but the mind is fully awake, guru is fully present, nothing more to be realized. But I was only seeing it. I was only seeing the mind. I wasn't seeing the body yet. And it was after a few months, when these little transformations started to take place, I realized, okay, fool, there's actually loads more to be done. You've only started your practice. It's funny, the practice really actually only starts when you perfect the 10th Bhumi, because if there's any confusion, with self-based confusion in the mind, you can't practice. You can't practice. It's not really practice. Like, it's a process of seeing through this selfing, but when selfing is occurring, there's no practice as such. So you're slipping in and out of almost like dream states, and you can't really fully practice when you're in these dream states, or when you're identifying with this self-based mind. So it's only when this self-based mind is completely switched off that now this is where the practice really starts. So this is the ultimate goal. The final realization is to realize all this through the entire physical body. Yeah, and that's my feeling on it, is that the practice isn't finished until this is fully realized through the body. So, for instance, if I was to die now, having not finished this stage of the practice, I would not be finished. I would have realized within the mind that self doesn't exist. So therefore, I wouldn't be thrown back into a new life. I wouldn't have this samsaric confusion that just pulls me back in to the physical world. I could take my time and decide when I want to come back, but I have to come back to finish this realization in the physical realm. There has to be the two sides of it, the non-physical realization and the physical realization. When those two are realized, then that's it. It's finished. There's no self anywhere. There's no ego. There's no nothing left. And then you go on to the next stage of the practice, but it doesn't take place in this world. It takes place, well, who knows? I don't. I'm excited to find out.
Yeah.
You've got to get through this stage first. So yeah, I mean, maybe that sounds kind of scary, kind of weird for some people. I wasn't sure if I wanted to really talk about that stuff, but yeah, this is basically what happens. Yeah, you realize in the non-physical realm first, and then that physical realm has to be realized then. And yeah, if it's not realized in this life, then you will have to come back at some point to realize it in the physical realm. Yeah.
So just to go back a little bit to try and sort of make this relatable for people, how has this expressed itself in your life? So from this first month where perhaps it felt there was this turbulence, but then things start to settle down, and there must have been, now you're discovering this new life.
It's been incredible. Like, I mean, the clarity is just so, it's so kind of energizing, this clarity that I have with everything in my life. It doesn't matter whether it's to do with my career or to do with my relationships with people or anything. Yeah, I mean, it's just this clarity, this clear understanding of everything that needs to be done and everything that doesn't need to be done. You know, whereas before it was just like everything was there. Everything was just like, oh, this, and I got to do all this stuff. Oh, I don't know, and just gonna do this. If that doesn't work, okay, I'll try this now.
That's how it's still going on.
Oh, man, I was so like this. Like, this past year has been a process of kind of trying to remove stuff from my life, because I realize how much stuff I have that I just don't need. Like, whether it's like just things that I have, like there's such a mess. Like, I'm a musician, so I was fascinated with musical instruments for years, and I just accumulated so much crap that I just don't need. So I'm kind of going through this process now of just getting rid of things that I don't need, because I'm so clear about what I need, what I have to do with my life, in my life, to achieve certain things, what I need, what I don't need. You know, it's all just crystal clear to me. You know?
It sounds like you're talking more than just material.
I'm talking everything. Material, you know, whether it's psychological, emotional stuff, you know, everything is just crystal clear, you know.
It's like the baggage of addictions and obsessions, these things you were focusing on which were pointless.
Totally pointless. Yeah, it's all completely gone. Yeah, I mean, I realize now how much of a kind of a addictive personality I had. You know, I would become obsessed with things, like so many things. Like, not that, like, I mean, there's good and bad sides to this. You know, I become obsessed with things and get very good at those things. But through this process, you would just accumulate so much material and emotional baggage, and just, it was so messy, the whole process. There was never clarity about what I needed to do in order to achieve certain results. It's always just blindly trying everything and, you know, making a mess of it a lot of the time. But because I was so obsessed, I managed to kind of sometimes figure it out and other times not. And it was very, very, very messy process. But now all that stuff is gone. You know, there's no addictive personality anymore. It's just someone that, if I love to do something, I do it, and if I don't want to do it, I don't do it. You know, it's and if I do it, I know exactly how to do it. It's like I can very easily visualize goals and endpoints, you know, because there's no self kind of going, oh, do I do this or do I do that? It's just, no, I do that.
From the outside, it's quite interesting hearing you describe all of this, because I'm learning about you and your personality. But from the outside, it seemed like you had a lot of discipline, that you talked somewhere about goals, and you were quite a goal-oriented person. You had these different expertise, but then you said it's a very different process for you now.
It's very, I still like with my music and my drumming and everything, I'm still, in fact, I work harder at it now, you know, but there's this clarity and there's this love for what I'm doing that wasn't there before. It was what was driving me before with this stuff was kind of an addicted mind, you know, as an obsessed mind, a mind that was just attached to wanting something, to wanting to achieve something, but didn't quite know how to get there. But now the experience is a mind that knows exactly how to achieve something. But at the same time doesn't give a toss whether it achieves it or not, because it's just kind of loving the process so much that it doesn't matter what the results are. It's just kind of enjoying doing whatever it's doing, you know.
So it's that intent that's there. That's the bit that you're enjoying. You're just loving the doing, and that it's going to lead to something good if it does, and if it doesn't, well, it's that part that was.
Of course. And like, I guess music is the biggest thing for me, and my drumming, and I'm just loving playing music now in a way that I never did before. I thought I was enjoying it before.
And playing for people.
Yes, yeah. It's just everything I do, like there's just always that love is just present, like so clearly in everything that I do. It's well, it makes life incredibly enjoyable, any little thing is lovely, yeah, I'm just really enjoying living my life in a very, very simple way, and realizing that I don't need all the clutter that was there before, realizing how simple it is to do a lot of these different things, with realizing how little I need to achieve results. Whereas before, thinking, oh, I need this and that. And yeah, my life was just a bit of a mess of ideas in my head, and having too many different material objects. And yeah, it's a very simple life that I'm living now. It's very, very, very much easier than it was, and only getting easier and easier every day. It's as more of that stuff kind of just filters out of the body and the brain and out of the thoughts and everything. Still a process of kind of filtering that stuff out, but I can see it all. Just there's no self there, no self-based mind that's kind of holding it in. It's all just kind of like filtering out by itself.
It's definitely something I'm going through at the moment. Is things like objectively seem quite simple in my life, but there's just all this overwhelm comes up. So that's how I experience my dark nights, is overwhelm. Yeah. And then when I try and look at what I'm overwhelmed about, it's all this made up stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Being overwhelmed by that stuff is yeah, because there's so much of it. It's so much clutter inside the mind, that you become overwhelmed by it. But this feeling of overwhelm is what kind of fuels the darkening of these nights. You have to learn to kind of sit with that feeling of being overwhelmed and just let it, just immerse yourself in it and let it burn itself out.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Brief experiences of cessations I've had, the main feeling that when it happens is freshness, and things seem clear. So that there's this sort of, everything's hazy and foggy and overwhelmed, and so I'm trying my best to sort of relate and understand what you've been describing as you've said the word fresh and clarity a couple of times. It's almost like a lid opens at the back of the head, and all of a sudden you see all around it, and suddenly everything feels a bit brighter, or feels bright.
yeah like it's the self-based mind is like trapping all this is clutter inside your experience. Your experience of life is just you can't, like you say, when that stuff dies away, you start to experience the world around you. You start to the way it felt with me is, after the 10th Bhumi perfected, I just felt like there was no blockages anymore. Like I said in that poem, no barriers anymore. It was just this complete openness to the universe. There was nothing there. It was just me and the universe. Yeah. So that's as clear as this complete clarity, But then this clutter that still remains within the body can be experienced also within this clarity. Like there's still this kind of source that is still remains, and yeah, but it's very easy to see it. It's very easy to, I'm totally clear on what I have to do, but it's like that, the clarity is there completely that you talk about, that clarity is kind of like completely stabilized after the 10th Bhumi perfection. So you can experience trauma and anxiety and all this stuff, but it's experienced within complete and utter clarity, It's interesting how this, so from an external perspective, it may seem like you're completely suffering and a complete, I don't know, just miserable, unhappy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's experienced within complete selfless clarity. It's so.
Yeah, like Helena and a couple of others have been quite very honest about their experiences of this trauma that comes up, and the trauma sounds like it is there, and you can't hide away from it whatsoever anymore. And it expresses itself, and you feel tired and might come across as grumpy or angry or these various other emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no suppression mechanism anymore. So if whatever's there is there, you got to deal with it. That's the function of the selfing machine is there. It's a suppression mechanism. Yeah, it's that's what it does. It helps you stuff all that stuff down into your subconscious. So you can remain. You can kind of hold on to some level of sanity. That's the function of this selfing machine. The self-based mind it creates a world that you can function inside, because if it's not there, then it protects you from your karma. It protects you from this stuff. If it's not there, we'd all be raving lunatics. Existence would be horribly traumatic. It's like when I opened my sixth Bhumi and I experienced the karma that was there, that remained. And at that sort of stage, I was pretty clear, there wasn't much stuff left, and it was a horrible experience, so I can imagine someone who's got a lot of karmic stuff to deal with. Imagine all that selfing mechanism completely disappearing. Jesus, it would be an incredibly traumatic experience, and not something that anybody should go through, So that's the function of this self-based mind. It protects us. Yeah.
So how's life for you now? And we've you've described a little bit of where it's leading with your practice, but this is what you're doing is it with the Hindu practices? From Baba?
The mantras, Mahasiddha practice, the mantras. Been doing those for a little while now. They are very nice. Basically, that's been my practice, just those mantras and sitting really, and just kind of, focusing on that remaining self, that remaining kind of me, what is this me that remains? It's illusory. It's just as illusory as the self-based mind was, but just sitting and watching. Exactly. So the practice is actually very similar in a way. But before we use this rainbow body yoga to churn up this self so that we can see it more clearly. But now I don't need a practice to help me to see this. It's just there, this remaining sense of self is just there. So I just sit and watch that. And it's also exactly the same with asking Guru for help and guidance and all this, and praying to the Guru. And so in a way the practice is very similar, but what I'm dealing with is there's no scattered, confused self-based mind. It's just that ego, I like to say, is the ego, rather than, even though I think maybe people are confused about self and ego, and which is, and for me it's like the self-based mind is that clutter of confusion, that illusion that's generated by the self-based mind, but that ego is still there afterwards. It still remains, that one ego still remains. So it's like the ego gets dealt a really kind of savage blow once you see through that self-based mind. The ego loves that self-based mind because there's so much for it to hold on to grip onto. But when that self-based mind is gone, it's like it just has this body left to cling to. It's just barely clinging on by its fingernails to this last little bit of confusion. And once that's seen through in the body, then ego has nothing to hold on to. But ego is never there in the first place. It's only one way of describing it. Like, the ego isn't holding on to that remaining sense of self. It's that remaining sense of self that makes you think that the ego is there. So it's kind of like two approaches to seeing through that remaining little bit of self, that remaining ego as such. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for this whole chat we've been had. It's been lovely to get to know you and sort of dive into your journey and find out about what actually went on. And really nice to I've learned so much here. There's been quite a few aha moments for me, understanding as well the mindset that you've had throughout. This almost mindset that you had from the beginning, where you found out about the the initial awakening practice, and you didn't dive in straight away. You sort of let it sit.
Yeah. I waited for my moment. Yeah.
And it sounds you're doing a similar thing now. It's like you're learning what you can through this practice. You're learning from the teacher within you.
Yeah.
Before you jump ahead, before you're ready.
Yeah. Seeing what reveals itself, because at this point I've kind of, I've realized, I've seen through all this illusion. I've done all that stuff. I'm kind of finished that stuff. So at this point, it feels like more than ever, it feels like my path, that I kind of don't need anything anymore, even though I do in a way, but it feels like, like I said, this is my path and I need to find my way at this point. But obviously I also need help. I'm not going to completely just not get any help with it. I do need help. We all need help. Anybody at this stage needs help. But I need to, I've spent the last year and a half just kind of getting any kind of guidance from my guru that I possibly can, and just going with that. And now I kind of feel like now I can really start practicing again. I'm ready to start practicing again. It's been more just a very kind of laid back and just trying to kind of filter out the trauma from the body now for the past.
You've been patient with your body, it sounds.
Yeah. Not forcing it anymore. I would have maybe forced it a little bit before, and possibly somewhat irresponsibly, maybe. I got through the practice maybe too quickly, and that's why my body was kind of so traumatized by the process. But now I'm just, I'm being patient. I don't feel the need now to rush through, to perfect Bhumis or, do this quickly. Like there was, I realize now, there was that ego there before kind of driving me. And it's not a bad thing, it was driving me to practice and wanting me to achieve something without realizing, that this is ultimately the kind of complete death of the ego, so, but at the same time, there was that ego kind of making me practice. But now that all that stuff is gone and there's just that remaining ego, now the ego just wants to take its time, relax, and see what happens. But now I'm starting to feel that kind of desire again to finish this off. And it feels like it'll be also quite quickly done, at this stage. This doesn't feel like there's a lot. It feels like my body is like completely, it's had its rest, it's ready to finish the process.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It's really pleasing to hear how it's been for you afterwards. It's that everything's settled down and that you've had your chance to enjoy this realization that you've had. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's been a very enjoyable process, even though it's been difficult as well. Like when you're experiencing that trauma in the body, when the self-based mind is gone, you're really experiencing it, and everything is it's very evident to the condition of the body and the mind, and that in a way is difficult, but at the same time it's lovely as well to be free of that clutter of the confused self-based mind. Cool. Well, thanks for being so open, and you've been really easy to chat to, and really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, so have I. Yeah,
so you've explained it very groundedly and from just a personal experience of how it's been, and so I think that will be very useful and relatable to people.
It was tricky, kind of, because I'm actually, I've barely even thought about this stuff for ages, and I was going to read through some notes before doing this interview to kind of remind me of how I kind of express this stuff with words, but I decided, no, actually it's better just to say it. But it kind of like me at this stage, I'm kind of trying to remember almost, insight and all this stuff that was useful to me before, because it just never comes into my mind at all now these days. It's kind of not necessary for me at all. So I kind of feel like, almost in a way, like I feel like someone who had no experience with a Dharma practice, or has No, none at all. Like I just feel completely empty. Like if you were to like, I've got some friends that come up to me sometimes who I would have used to talk to about meditation and spirituality, and they start talking to me about stuff, and I just kind of go, all right, well. So they kind of think, you're not interested in this stuff. And I'm kind of, well, yeah, I don't know.
Just giving up.
Just kind of, yeah, I just kind of say to them, I just don't really need it anymore. It's just kind of don't feel the need anymore. And they kind of go, okay, all right.
It's quite nice in a way to have caught you like this, and that you've let it, because as we were talking about those early stages of your realization and just this warmth and love that came through you, it was nice to, it was sort of touching to see the emotion come up.
Yeah. It's been quite a journey for me. I guess, it's the past few months, like I say, it's felt very like the process is kind of over, and I never really think about that stuff. But that's only because I'm about to feels like I'm about to embark really on this next stage, although I have been on it completely, but now I feel like, okay, now it's time to really get stuck in and, finish the practice off. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Shane. I hope all the next stage of the practice, the rest of the practice goes nice and smoothly for you.
I'm sure it will. Yeah.
And really appreciate this chat that we've had.
Yeah, great. Yeah, me too, man. It's been really nice. Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Many blessings.